Hey, everybody, and welcome to our weekly powwow together. We're back after a short break for the Lunar New Year. If you were celebrating last week, you might still be celebrating, but welcome back. It's good to be back. It's been kind of a crazy week. I have had already, it's only Thursday at 4 p.m. in Singapore. And by the way, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be watching from. But already this week, I've done 4 workshops. And a lot of those workshops had to do with universal design for learning, differentiated instruction, things that we're going to look at today. And that has kind of informed what we're going to get into today. Before I get ahead of myself, though, again, welcome. And let me just do a quick introduction to our topic today. And in case you have not been on one of our sessions before, let me introduce myself. Here's our topic. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about lesson planning in the context of universal design for learning, building on what we covered in our last session. If you missed the last session, you might want to go back and take a look at that, because we unpack what UDL is, the origins of UDL, sort of the purpose of UDL, and we looked at a couple of ways that we can approach lesson planning. But today we're going to get really practical, and I'll get into that more in a moment. Let me just flash up my contact information. There that is. If you'd like to stay in touch after today, LinkedIn is a great way to do that. There's my email, or even better, there is a QR code and a URL that you can go to. That is it's kind of a group that are birds of a feather, Facebook group, where we talk about applying AI in teaching and learning, generative AI in teaching and learning. So many of the things that we'll go through today. So would love to have you over in that Facebook group. Okay, so today I'm changing direction very, very slightly today on the basis of 3 things that have happened over the last few days. So I mentioned I was doing these workshops with teachers, and they were typical in the sense that they had a good sense for what generative AI is, and they're using it in certain ways. But there's so many tools that are out there now, they were a little bit overwhelmed. And I often get this question, well, which is the best AI tool that I should use? And that's a difficult thing to answer. It's nearly impossible. And if you've seen this dated reference from me before, I ask your forgiveness. But that's a lot like asking which search engine would win the browser wars back in 1997. And of course, this is a trick question, because you'll notice there's a search engine that's not even on the screen, Google, if you didn't pick up on it immediately. They weren't even a company yet. They didn't become a company and weren't going to market until 1998. Said all that to say, we're sort of in that space right now with generative AI very broadly. But certainly in education, we may not be looking at the best tools just yet. Look what happened just over the last 10 days or so with DeepSeek absolutely, roiling the markets. And that wasn't even an innovation necessarily. It was just catching up to where the other tools are, like ChatGPT and Gemini and so forth. But the big aha moment was they only spent about $6 million reportedly to get there. Matter of fact, we'll look at DeepSeek. There is some pretty interesting things that you can do in DeepSeek. And if you're concerned about the DeepSeek site, which has had a few problems because so many people have been getting onto the app and going to the site, you can go to Perplexity now if you've got the pro version of Perplexity, or you can use other tools that are hosted in other countries that are still using that DeepSeek R1 model to do things like research and to at least do some basic fundamental logic and thinking about a topic. We'll have a look at that if we have time today. But I diverge and I go down a rabbit hole. Forgive me for that. In case you weren't with us, let me just very briefly introduce UDL. If this is a new concept, if you're in education, very likely you know UDL, you may be trying to apply UDL. If you are coming from a workplace learning environment, UDL might be less familiar. So the framework itself, and we'll take a look at the framework in a moment, is designed to promote equitable, accessible learning opportunities for all learners. And so there's many dimensions to that. In fact, there are 31 different checkpoints along the way in the framework. We'll look at UDL at a high level and ask for some advice from generative AI on how to approach our lesson planning. Commonly, the objections and the challenges that you hear around UDL have to do with time and resource limitations, maybe training gaps, not understanding UDL. There's a whole raft of training, great training that's out there on how to implement UDL. This is not that. This is a very specific aspect of approaching UDL. If you want to know more about UDL, I'd encourage you to check out one of those good courses on UDL very broadly so that you can really get immersed in it. So that kind of catches you up to where we are in terms of this series. This is part 2 in a 3-part series. So what I'd like to do at this point is, now I mentioned that I've diverted the attention for today very slightly. The first influence on that was these workshops, the questions that I was getting from the teachers that I was working with, and the realization that just giving access to things like prompts or establishing a baseline maybe isn't quite enough if you really want to try to embrace UDL with AI. So we will look at some specific approaches. The other thing that has influenced me is we're actually creating, we being Noodle Factory, are creating a course and hosting a course on this very topic that you can take on the Noodle Factory platform. There's a meta aspect to that in the sense that we're using AI to teach the application of AI in the classroom. So wrap your head around that if you can. But that's coming, but that's influencing me in the way that we're thinking in terms of, and I want you to imagine this, if you were able to look over the shoulder of someone, and I'll use myself as the example, because I'm using these tools as a practitioner to create not only lesson plans, but materials, and often now to deliver materials with the assistance of AI. I wanted to kind of give you a glimpse of at least how I do this, and not that I'm holding myself up as the paragon of how best to approach this, but just to give you some examples. So in that sense, rather than just looking strictly at lesson planning, what we're going to do is hopefully give you some inspiration on how you can approach this topic very practically, maybe as soon as today, depending on what you're working on. So let me go ahead and I'm going to open up a browser. Just let me do that right here. And there we go, get my browser up and running. So there's our browser, and I'm going to just switch over here to, I have a document that I put together around differentiated instruction. So it's a related topic to UDL, but of course it's a unique topic on its own. I happen to have a workshop coming up next week in Singapore. By the way, if you're going to be in Singapore next week, it's on Tuesday. I'll put the link into the chat, or we'll get the link into the chat if you're interested. It's an open workshop, so I think there's still some space. There'll be a number of schools there. But we're looking at specifically how do you use AI in the service of differentiated instruction. Now, the point here is I've done a lot of work on this just in terms of resources and an outline and different thoughts and materials, but this isn't a lesson plan yet. And one of the things we saw last week is we can use AI to create a lesson plan and maybe even a UDL lesson plan. And if I go ahead and I kick that off, and I'll just say, this isn't the way I would actually do this, but I'll just copy and paste for a basic prompt, bring this in here. So we'll say it's university level. We'll keep it at 60 minutes. This might be one module, let's say, but that'll open up a Google Doc, and it will begin to create this lesson plan for me. Very easy, saves a lot of time. Not something that I would just copy and paste and use, but it's going to probably be something very useful. Now, we also looked at a tool that specifically, it's called Ludia, that's hosted on Po, po.com, which stands for the Platform for Open Experimentation, I believe. That also has a really good lesson planning tool that at least gives me a good starting point. And the nice thing about Ludia, and then of course with Brisk, which is what I was using before, I can tune the prompts so that I get specific information about the UDL checkpoints or considerations. Now, today, I really want to focus in on this aspect, optimizing choice and autonomy. This is where we left off our conversation last week, allowing students to have a say in their learning by offering choices in assignments or project topics. Now, that sounds great, but this is where, remember, the objections or the challenges related to UDL: time, resources. I just don't have enough time to offer all of these different choices, because that may mean that I need to go and create materials that I don't have time to do already. So here's where we're going to look at some practical approaches to this. So if I jump back over here to here's my lesson plan that Brisk is creating for me. So there's some decent ideas in here. Now, this is more focused on the classroom. I'm going to think through this. If I were to prompt this again, I'd probably say, I want to use an example of maybe something like a business course. Maybe I'm teaching a marketing course at a polytechnic. To start off with, in the real world, one of the things that I have access to now, and will be coming to a generative AI tool very soon near you, is the ability to actually get some advice and to have a conversation, not just with my keyboard, but with my voice in a very natural way with a generative AI tool. Now, if you're using the paid version of ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, on and on, you have that capability today, particularly on a mobile device. But I'm going to show you something here that might be a little bit different, something that you might not have seen before. So I'm going to share my screen. This is what is called Google AI Studio. Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you okay. Is there anything you would like to discuss?
Yes, I'm going to move over to this
Okay,
screen.
I understand.
Can you
How
see
can
this
I help
okay?
you today?
Can you see this screen okay? What do you see?
I see a website titled UDL Guidelines from CAST, which appears to be about universal design for learning. There are 3 main sections: engagement, representation, and action and expression, each with several options listed underneath.
That's right.
Is there a specific part?
Yeah, I'm very interested
Okay,
in
I understand.
consideration 7.1.
Is there anything else you would like me to look at or discuss about the page?
Yes, I'm on a different page now, and it's optimized choice and autonomy. I'd really like you to brainstorm with me about this. What are some ways that in my teaching, in a business school context, I'm teaching a marketing course, what are some ways that I can optimize choice and autonomy for students who might be working on a marketing plan for an imagined coffee shop in Singapore?
Okay, so you would like to brainstorm some ways to optimize choice and autonomy in your marketing class, where students are working on a marketing plan for an imagined coffee shop in Singapore. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I'm particularly interested in choices for them in the way that they learn and the way that they engage with the materials.
Okay, it sounds like you're especially interested in giving your students choices in how they learn and engage with the course materials. One way to do this is to provide options for content exploration, allowing students to choose topics of particular interest. Would you like me to elaborate on this idea?
That's okay. I'm good for now. So I'm just going to stop that. So you'll notice it wasn't perfect, but imagine what that means for things like brainstorming, or if I needed to know how to do something, as we may be able to try in a moment with a tool. But you can see that that's all in this Google AI Studio, which is completely free right now. That may not last forever, but right now that's completely free. So exploring something like the UDL guidelines and using that as brainstorming. Now, could I do that with my keyboard? Certainly. Maybe it's a little bit easier to do it with my keyboard now, but for us, here's that meta kind of perspective that we can bring to this topic. For us, this is interesting because we're learning how to use AI in the service of UDL. But you can also imagine, what if I, in the future, had the ability to give my students access to this type of engagement? So, that might be something useful, very interesting. Um, One way, I'm sure if I continue that conversation with Gemini, one of the common ways that we can approach giving choice is to create an agent or a chatbot who knows a lot about the topic that we're studying. And here's an example of how I would do that. Now I'm using the Noodle Factory platform, which is the company I co-founded, the platform I co-founded. So there's some familiarity here and there's some bias here, but uh, just to show you how I would do this, I've got a document. Remember that document that I shared with you about differentiated instruction? If I just wanted to drag that in, essentially, that can be the basis for a lot of different engagement that I allow my students to have. And so if I just go and grab that document, pull that over here, and I can upload that. And what that's going to do, that'll take just a little bit to contextualize. That will allow me to publish that to my students, either in the learning management system, or I can just give them access via a web browser or Microsoft Teams, Google Classroom, so they can get to that. And maybe as a supplement to what's going on in the classroom, this is a choice that they have now. They can use their keyboard, their voice, they can engage. And I'll show you in just a moment that some of the other things that we can do are to create knowledge checks and to create coaching sessions or role plays. So if we take a step back from the classroom for a moment and we imagine maybe this is for professional development, perhaps we want to do some coaching around this. So now that's done, and I'll go ahead and open that up. Hey, I'm struggling to understand how I can apply differentiated instruction in my classroom. I'm looking for ideas on how I can use AI, generative AI specifically, to do that. Can you help me with that? And so this is all now just going to explore that article or that document that I put together. And so you can see here, we've got some references that I can go back to. It'll show me exactly where that came from in the document. So there's the document that I had uploaded. That's on page 3. So you can imagine now, if I've got tons of material, that I just drag this in and I can allow students to engage with this. It's a different way for them to work with the content, and a different way to have a learning experience that goes beyond just reading, or maybe some of the more static or linear ways that we're working today. Let me just say something else. I might say, well, let me use my voice. I'm more comfortable in Spanish. Could we switch to Spanish, please? All right, so now I'm going to ask a question in Spanish, and because my Spanish is actually not that good, even though I speak a little bit, um, what is an example of, let's see, lesson, let's say, reading releveling in differentiated instruction that AI can help me with? Nothing like working real time. So let's do that in Spanish. And now what the agent will do is it's going to switch immediately to Spanish. And so I don't have to change any settings as a learner. I could just move into a new language. And so think about outside of the classroom. Many of us have ESL learners where at home, those learners are speaking another language. English might be a second or even third language for those learners. And so this isn't a replacement for using English, let's say, in the classroom, or any other language that we might be using in the classroom, but this is a supplement. And so students can come in and they can work with the content, the materials, unpack that, explore it at their own pace, in their own language, to develop that comfort and confidence. And the research says that when we do this, what we're able to provide is a pathway towards more engagement with those students. And this is still an emerging field with the use of generative AI, but this is something to try out. Okay, I'll come back here in a moment because I wanted to show you something, a different way of allowing learners to engage with this same material with a role play. If we do have time, we'll come back to that. I recognize we're kind of quickly running out of time today. Here's another example, another, at the moment, free tool that we can use. And this is a tool that you might have played around with before. It's great for research. It's also becoming really good and interesting for creating materials. I can take documents and I can create audio overviews. I can generate, as you probably have seen or maybe done yourself, podcast level explainer audio files. And so we'll kick that off so that that can be something we can come back and listen to. We'll give that a moment. The other thing that I can do with generative AI that now becomes very easy is the creation of videos, explainer videos particularly. Now, these are not the types of videos that necessarily you can go in and, let's say, for example, you're in medical education. I want to see a video of a particular procedure, or maybe I have a very technical subject and I want to see a very detailed, accurate overview of this technical discussion. That's not really what these are for today, but I'll just click on this. This is in Google Vids, and this is something using that same document that I created, and I'll just let this play so you can see it. It created the video, and by the way, I can insert myself in the video. I can edit these videos very easily. Really easy, quick. Took about maybe 3 or 4 minutes to create.
In this workshop, we'll explore how the application of generative can enhance differentiated instruction, helping.
So we've got the music, we've got the narration that has all been created, and I can also turn on captions, and that can be auto-generated. And when I export,
you create more personalized learning experiences for your students. AI enhanced.
All of this then becomes a part of the export package that I can give to students. I can publish this on the LMS, or I can provide this as a resource to students. So this is good. This is interesting. The one, though, and we can do this in English today. There are some other tools, however, that allow us to do explainer videos. And you might notice we're putting the links to these if you wanted to take a look at these in the chat. So that was Google Vids. Here's another tool, kind of a purpose-built tool that is really interesting when it comes to supporting UDL. This is, again, the same document, the same prompt that I used to create this video. It's a little more flexible. Let me just let this run for a moment.
Teachers, let's chat about something that's revolutionizing our classrooms. AI-enhanced differentiated instruction, or DI, is all about recognition.
So here we can use different accents, different languages, and I'll show you an example of this right now that was created in video, and show you how the process works. So if I'll switch over here to, this is a recording that I had done earlier, and just show you how I created this particular topic. So I'm imagining I've got a French class, 16-year-old students. They're also studying other languages, so potentially we've got some cognitive overload that's happening here. We have students that are probably getting confused between the languages. So I go ahead and that's my prompt. That's what I'm looking for, is a video that will help me to reach these students about verbs and verb conjugation in the French language. Now, I'm not going to make you sit through that entire process, but I did time this. It took just under 4 minutes to create what I'm about to show you. So if I flip over here, you can see that I've got 2 videos. One is in French and one is in English. What you didn't see, or might not have seen in the prompt, is I asked for the French video.
Bonjour à tous. Aujourd'hui, nous allons explorer le monde un peu mystérieux du subjonctif en français. Pour ceux d'entre
And I asked for
Hey
the
everyone.
equivalent video.
Today,
In
we're
English.
diving into the interesting world of the French subjunctive. I know some of you also speak Mandarin or Malay, so let's break it all down and see the similarities.
So with a pretty straightforward prompt, I was able to, in less than 4 minutes, create these two videos which kind of follow a similar track, but they're using different languages. And of course, language is very bound up in culture. So for students who maybe are at a higher level with French, we can explain the concepts in French. For those students who might need English or Mandarin or Malay, we can do that explanation and provide examples from the creation of this video that draw from their pre-existing language knowledge. So something that would have taken hours, if not days, and been hugely expensive before. So this gives me the ability to do something now pretty interesting with generative AI. All right, so let's switch back over, and I've got a couple of other things as ideas that I wanted to share with you before we wrap up for today. We head back over to our browser. There we were in video. One of the things that we talked about, I believe last week or the week before, is the ability to get students to do different types of low stakes, especially or formative assessments, where maybe we're asking them to do a podcast or a video or something a little more creative. In other words, moving away from writing as a way to assess whether or not learning has occurred. The downside of that is potentially that takes us a very long time. So I want to just give you an example of how we might approach this in a slightly different way. So imagine for a moment you have asked students to create in a marketing class a product introduction video. And this just happens to be one that our marketing team created. And I'll just let it play for just a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about.
Education is evolving and AI
that's me
is
doing the
everywhere. But how do you find the
So I'll stop that. So that's a two-minute long video. So how could I get AI to assess that? How could I use AI to maybe assess videos of something that students have created like this? Or, and there's me, maybe a presentation. Maybe I'm doing a presentation.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Wagstaff, and I'd like to talk to you about
So I've got these two videos, and I just want to show you an example of how AI can, with a rubric, grade videos, provide marks, provide feedback. So let me just come right down here and let's see, what am I looking for? There we go. So this is another kind of experiment. So this is going to be coming to a generative AI tool for education near you, including Noodle Factory. But I just wanted to give you a sense of how this might work. So we're going to add in one of those videos, and we'll upload the file. Let me just go ahead and grab that. Okay, so there's the one. There's the marketing video that we were looking at before. All right, so that's loading up. We'll give that just a second. And then what I'm going to apply is a rubric, essentially. And while that's working, I'm going to go ahead and grab my rubric. And something that I've already created. It's not really complicated. In fact, it's just text-based. So I'm going to create a custom prompt here. And you can see I'm saying, please evaluate the following video presentation of a new product. So teaching a class at a polytechnic in Singapore. Then I've got the sort of feedback that I want to provide. I believe I put a score. Yeah, so each of the areas is being scored 1 through 5. And then I can generate that. And it is going to go and evaluate that video. I can do the same thing for audio. So if students have produced a podcast or if they've recorded themselves doing a presentation, that could be really interesting. I'm going to go ahead and open up another window And I'm going to get this second type of video going just so that we don't run out of time, because we're getting very short on time. I think I said that before, but now we're really getting short on time. But let me just grab that video. And this is the one that is me presenting. So imagine, if you want to look for things like body language, you want...
Hi, everybody.
Oops.
My name is Jim.
I can play that again. Browse and upload here. This is the one that I'm looking for. All right, so we'll let that upload. But imagine you want to look for things like body language and pace and tone of voice, little quirks, pet words, pet phrases, happy feet, as I call it, moving around a little bit too much. That's pretty difficult to do. You'd have to literally watch the entire video, provide feedback. But imagine if you could give that sort of feedback using AI, at least preliminary feedback or feedback in low stakes environments. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. And as you can see, so we jump back over here. So now we've run that prompt, and here is the evaluation that we're getting. So you're gonna have to take this back to the marketing team. So okay on some of the things. My disembodied voice may lack some of the personal engagement of a live presenter. So pretty interesting. It's giving us some good feedback. Maybe we should have run this video through the feedback engine before we published it. Now let's see about the live presentation, how this does. We'll just jump back over here while that's running. Oh, is that done already? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so you can see here, clear message, lower score, relatively lower score on the visual appeals because it's just a talking head video. Organization and clarity, okay. Persuasiveness, not so much. This isn't really a marketing video. I guess I should have explained that, but audio and video are smooth, no noticeable distractions. And then presentation skills. Oh, thankfully I got full marks on that. Okay, so there are a couple of then connected things that we can do. We can use AI to create these videos or to speed the process of publishing these videos. But if we're using them in the service of assignments, then it gives us a way to really have a nice, quick, clean set of feedback and potentially marks that we give to students that don't take hours or weeks, potentially, if we're talking about video or audio. But students can get that instantaneous feedback, which is so important when we're using assessment in the service of learning. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some ideas. I know that kind of was more of a brainstorming session, but hopefully that gives you some ideas on how you can approach this in your own practice. If we think about those elements of UDL, and if I just flash back up those challenges that we often come up against in UDL, the time constraints, the resource limitations, the training gaps, is there a need to have greater AI literacy to learn these tools, to become pretty proficient in using the tools? Yes. But if we're able to overcome that and get somewhat comfortable and develop a good foundation of things like prompt engineering and the basic usage of these generative AI tools, we can overcome time constraints and resource limitations. Okay, so in our third and final part of this discussion, so we're actually going to look at a complete lesson and show you a lesson from a student's viewpoint. Today was really from the educator viewpoint, but give it to you from a student's viewpoint so you can have a sense of, if we're able to do all of the things that we just went through today in rapid fire fashion and give students the choice, what does that experience look like, and what will they see, and what are some of the approaches that students might choose to take if they're given those options. Thank you so much for joining today. There's my contact information again. And please, if you're interested in this topic and interested in engaging in this conversation, use that QR code, use that URL, and we will put that into the chat as well to join our educator network. Again, sort of birds of a feather. We're on the same path, really trying to figure out how best to safely and ethically introduce generative AI into our teaching and learning. And with that, we will see you next week.